Assignment 2, Part 2. Decentralization and New Jewish Centers. By the late 10th century, the days of glory for Babylon's Jewish community had passed. A combination of political problems and economic difficulties meant that, although Jews would live in the area until the mid-20th century, Babylon's influence declined. One of the extraordinary features of Jewish history is that as certain communities declined, others always developed to take their place. As Eretz Yisrael declined, Babylon took its place. As Babylon declined, several other Jewish centres rose in the diaspora to create a new multi-centre model. We will examine 3 of these important centres around the year 1000 CE. Let us meet one representative from each of these centres. A. North Africa.
Shalom to you. I am the Nagid of Kairouan, Abu Ishaq Abraham ibn Attah, and I welcome you to our community. Kairouan is 125 kilometers south of the town of Tunis in North Africa. We are, of course, a far greater town than Tunis, both for Jews and non-Jews, but I mention Tunis because people are more familiar with it, since it is nearer the coast of North Africa. We are an old and distinguished town dating back to the conquest of North Africa by the Arabs when Islam was expanding in the 7th century. We Jews have been here since the early years of the town. We have thrived in commerce and become a wealthy community. I myself am a doctor, court physician to the Emir Badis, ruler of the whole area. I have been appointed as the Nagid, the leader of the Jewish community, and I am happy to say that our relations with Badis and the Muslim rulers here are very friendly. I am also a general in Badis's army and have to fight when necessary, but luckily this does not take up much of my time. Thankfully, I still have time for my Jewish studies. I study at the yeshiva with the great scholar Rabbi Hushiel, an outstanding halakhic expert. People say that his son Hananel will go on to even greater things. Scholars flock here from many places. We have students from Spain, from all of North Africa, and from Italy. Our yeshiva is flourishing, and our community in general is flourishing.
B. Spain.
Welcome to Cordoba, the jewel of Andalusia in southern Spain. We Jews are truly blessed here. We came here with the Muslims in the 7th century, and since then we have been treated on the whole very well indeed. I am Hanoch ben Moshe, the rabbinic leader of the community. I'm not actually from Spain myself. I was born in Babylon and arrived here with my father when I was still a child. It was a long and painful story how we ended up in Spain. We were captured by pirates at sea. We had come to the area in order to raise money for the yeshivot in Babylon. Luckily, we were ransomed and ended up in Cordoba. My father's learning was immediately recognized, and he soon became the head of the yeshiva here. Our family has led the community in halakhic scholarship ever since. We have great Jewish philosophers, scientists, mathematicians, and a vast majority of them are good Jews who are faithful to our Torah and ancient traditions. Many of my students are drawn to the scholarship of the non-Jewish world. They tell me that the whole world is God's glory, and that we cannot limit our learning to the relatively narrow realm of the halakha. I don't agree that the halakha is narrow. For me it represents the entire world. But I understand their concerns. As long as they can merge the two worlds together, the Jewish world and the outside world, I do not have an issue. We are well treated by and feel close to the educated Muslims who rule our city. In recent years, some other Muslim groups, less tolerant and more fanatical, have disrupted our peaceful society. But I am confident that they will not cause us a major problem. If we respect the world around us, it will learn to respect us too.
C. Northern Europe.
Greetings, my name is Rabbi Gershom. You know, these lands of the north can be hard places to live. Rain, storms, snow in the winter. It can get exceptionally cold here. Thankfully, the study house is well heated. My students are young and hardly seem to feel the cold, so great is their devotion to Torah. The yeshiva that we are developing here in Mainz has become very popular throughout the Germanic lands of Ashkenaz. More and more young men arrive here to study each year. Most of them are able to study full-time for a few years. Their fathers are wealthy merchants who want their sons to get a good Jewish education before returning home to work in the family business. They will perhaps sail on their father's boats down the River Rhine to the warmer lands of southern Europe. I know that you have met great scholars in North Africa and Spain, and I have no doubt that interesting things are happening in those communities. But they water down their Torah learning with all sorts of subjects from the outside world. They also socialize with the non-Jewish Muslim population, and it seems like this has gone to their heads. Here things are different. Of course we have contact with the non-Jewish population in the course of our daily work as traders and craftsmen. We supply all sorts of services and goods to them, but we would never mix with them socially. The non-Jews here are peasants and lowly types. Most are illiterate and uneducated, and they talk about a man called Jesus who they think is God. So we keep to ourselves and nobody bothers us. We warm the cold and profane world around us with the warmth of our lives and our learning.
Kairouan, Cordoba and Mainz, all thriving Jewish centres. It is not by chance that 2 out of the 3 people we met were rabbis and scholars. Rabbis and scholars were important leaders of their communities during this period. There were other leaders also, community officials like Abu Ishaq Abraham of Kairouan, who were important by virtue of their prestige and wealth. They formed the political leadership of communities. This dual model of leadership was not so different from either the partnerships between elders and priests in the tribal communities of biblical times, or the partnerships between the exilarch, Resh Galuta, and the heads of the great yeshivot in Babylon. The non-Jewish rulers of all 3 cities had encouraged the Jews to live in their cities. The Jews were seen as an urban, educated, elite group who could make an important contribution to the city's economy and administration. They were also seen as loyal subjects who would not pose a threat to national security because they had no power. Other groups might call in outside armies on occasion. The Jews had no such option. As a powerless people, they relied on their usefulness and perceived loyalty to ensure their acceptance by rulers and by the outside world. Communities rise, communities fall. Cordoba was the first of the 3 Jewish centres to suffer crisis. About 10 years after our visit, the whole town was ransacked as a result of political feuding. The Jews suffered together with everybody else and fled to other places. Over the next generations, they slowly rebuilt the community once more. But in the mid-12th century, the Jews of Cordoba suffered again, this time specifically as Jews. Following the invasion of a fanatical Islamic group of North African warriors, the Jews were forced to either convert or flee. One of those Jews was the young Moshe ben Maimon, who became known as Maimonides, one of the greatest ever Jewish scholars. The community in Cordoba recovered once again when the Christians conquered the city from the Muslims, but almost the whole community was destroyed in the late 14th century in a great massacre. The small Jewish community that survived was finally thrown out of Spain in the great expulsion of the Spanish Jews in 1492. Kairouan suffered its first major blow about 50 years after our visit. Arab invaders from Egypt killed many of the Jews and destroyed the great community institutions. The community recovered partially, but 100 years later, in the 12th century, Kairouan became a city designated for Muslims only. From this point on, no Jew would live there for more than 700 years. Mainz lasted the longest as a major Jewish centre, but almost 100 years later, at the end of the 11th century, the community was decimated during the massacres of the First Crusades. 1,000 Jews were killed, including almost all of the great scholars. Mainz's yeshiva and other Jewish buildings were destroyed. Jews did return to Mainz, but they suffered hardship after hardship. Massacres and exiles featured regularly over the next centuries. Never again would the community attain the importance that it had at the time of our visit. We can see a pattern with these Jewish centres which occurs time and time again in the history of the Jewish diaspora. Each of these three Jewish communities rose to prominence because the Jews served the economic and social interests of the surrounding population, or at least of the area's rulers. Pragmatic rulers realised that it worked to their own interests to grant rights and privileges to Jews in order to attract them to their own areas. These rights included the ability to live their religious and cultural lives as they wanted. The Jews were therefore given the freedom to develop their own community leadership and institutions. It all went wrong in one of three circumstances. 1. The Jews no longer filled the role they had been valued for. 2. Rulers stopped being pragmatic and became influenced by ideology. 3. Rulers lost control over the people that they ruled. Owing to a combination of these three factors, Kairouan, Cordoba and Mainz all slipped into decline. Closed communities, open communities. It is worth noting that each of the three Jewish centres we examined were halachic communities. All accepted the legacy of Rabbinic Judaism and all developed great institutions of Torah learning, but nevertheless they produced very different types of Jews. The community of Mainz produced Jews focused almost exclusively on the traditional world of Jewish learning. Programs of study concentrated simply on Torah and halachic literature, the Mishnah, the Gemara, and later law codes. This was connected with a fundamental attitude towards being Jewish. Jews in Mainz did not look for any social or cultural relationship with the non-Jewish world around them. On the other hand, Jews in Cordoba or Kairouan felt that they could learn a large amount from contact with the outside world. They could acquire an education that would benefit them both as Jews and as human beings in the wider world. How did this come about? We can understand these differences by considering what Jews thought of their non-Jewish neighbours among whom they lived. We can imagine, for example, the words of Rabbeinu Gershom from Mainz.
I can't imagine why anyone would want to spend time socially with non-Jews. They have nothing to offer us. They are ignorant and illiterate. Many of them are always drunk. I don't like them and I don't trust them. Better to stick amongst ourselves.
And Abu Ishaq Abraham from Kairouan might reply,
I don't understand why you say something like that. When I look about me, I see people of great intellect. I am surrounded by literate and learned people with whom it is a pleasure to talk. I love their language and their poetry. I find their philosophy interesting, even though there are, of course, some basic ideas that I cannot accept. It challenges me to think in new and different ways.
Wandering Jews. In a world where the fortunes of any given Jewish community could change so quickly, Jewish people were frequently on the move, escaping trouble in one place, looking for a better future in another place. In many ways, they were the first international community. The world was their homeland. Without special attachment to any one diaspora land, it was perhaps easier for them to consider moving compared to people who had been living in their native land for centuries. But when Jews did move, they usually moved to other Jewish communities with a similar cultural background. When the Ashkenazi Jews of England were expelled in 1290, they merged back into the Ashkenazi world of France and Germany, where they had originally come from. When tens of thousands of Jews left Spain in 1492, they usually moved to lands of Muslim heritage or lands under Muslim control, such as Portugal, North Africa, and the Ottoman Turkish Empire. After all, Spanish Jews had lived under Muslim rule for centuries. Rarely did Jews from Spain wander to the Christian lands of Northern or Eastern Europe. These worlds generally stayed well apart. That's the end of Assignment 2, Part 2. The final part, Assignment 2, Part 3, will start here.